Hi everyone and welcome to Conversation Street's first ever video interview with a member of the Corrie cast. And what a cast member we have for you today. Charlie De Melo, who plays street solicitor Imran Habeeb. Now earlier this week, the cast and crew of Coronation Street returned for the first time in over 2 months. And things were a little bit different to what they'd been used to before the pandemic. So Charlie De Melo kindly agreed to come onto the show to tell me a little bit about what it was like. Here's what he had to say. All right, Charlie, how you doing?
Hi, Michael. I'm very well, thank you.
Nice to see you.
Lovely to see you. Yeah, it's been forever.
I know it has, hasn't it? It's been too long. We've not been able to meet up properly in real life, thanks to this pandemic.
That's true. And there's been less Corrie, so there's been less for us to do interviews.
You don't see me when Corrie's. I'm missing seeing you. You better get Yasmin off, you know.
Yes, well, I hope so. Otherwise, people will be coming after me like... well, because usually any case that I get involved with ends poorly, so hopefully this one goes a little better.
Yeah. So how's your lockdown been? What's it been like for you the last couple of months?
To my shame, it has actually been quite nice. You know, I'd heard, I'd gotten wind that lockdown was going to come into effect, and so I went to go visit my parents beforehand, and they live in the country. They have the dog, obviously, who I love. And so I went down there. Lockdown gets enforced, and so then I'm basically in the middle of the country with the dog, beautiful weather, and not a huge amount to actually sort of worry about, like, because I don't have any dependents or anything. So it was, to my shame, I actually had quite a nice time. You know?
I know, I think we're kind of the same. It feels bad to say it, doesn't it? But
it does feel quite bad to say. But
and the nice weather, you know.
Yeah, you know, had it been lashing with rain, like it seems to have been as soon as we're all back at work.
I know.
Then it would have been a lot more grim. But yeah, as it stands, yeah, it could have been a lot worse for me anyway.
So now you're back in Manchester. What's it like being there? Your second home?
No, it's good. It's good. I've missed the gig a lot. Like, I really missed going to work and all the people and all that sort of stuff. But it is strange because though there are people there's far fewer of them, and we're having to engage at such a distance and in so briefly, because of the idea being that, you know, you don't want people to kind of congregate too much and whatnot. So it's it's odd. It feels, you know, like a kind of transition period back towards normality.
Yeah.
But as it stands, it's odd. But yeah, we're making the best of it so far.
Had you been? I mean, to what extent were you kept up to date with, you know, Corrie's returns for film plans for returning to filming while the lockdown was in place?
There was pretty regular communication throughout the lockdown. These are our intentions as to when we're going to be getting back, and I don't know if they wavered a huge amount on that. I think they were pretty. They managed to get back pretty much on schedule. And then as the weeks kind of commenced and that start date looked more and more likely, they started sending us memos and things like that, and rules and regs about how the building was going to be run from now on. What the new expectations, not only for the building itself, because they have done a huge amount of work there, but also, you know, on an individual basis, you know, what is expected of you as a person to hold up your end of making sure that this kind of quite counterintuitive, social distancing, and, you know, because when you're around friends and colleagues, you know, it does feel quite counterintuitive to remain at a distance and all that sort of stuff. You know, so making sure that we all have an awareness of our own responsibility in making sure that essentially we keep each other and ourselves safe.
Yeah. So what are some of the measures that Corrie's put in place then to make sure you do that? I've heard you got a 2 meter pointing sort of poking stick from Dave, the security guard.
Yes, security Dave has got his big pokey stick, which I'm sure he's thrilled about. No, they've been pretty comprehensive with it. Like, from the second you walk in the building, there are hand washing stations at the door. There are.
So for our listeners to picture this, imagine going into Weatherfield General through the front doors into the hospital.
No.
Oh, is it not that way?
Those front doors. No, not those front doors.
Oh, okay.
Because they're narrow and there's a turnstile there, so we wouldn't be able to maintain social distancing.
Okay.
And so if you're facing those sort of the regular entrance, just to the left of your left of those, there's like a what's the word for it now? We wheel like food and like stock and stuff like that, like big wide open doors and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Does this make sense?
I think big like hanger. Yeah, doors. Yeah, I think.
Kind of like a hanger.
Yeah.
And so just through there are a couple of medical professionals there. One of whom takes your temperature with a little like thing at the forehead, little sort
Zapper.
of infrared type thing on the forehead. Gives you a little ding. You're asked, have you had an unusual cough recently, a fever, spike in, temperature, whatever. And then there are masks. There is hand gel, which you're able to take and use. There are hand washing stations everywhere.
Yeah.
And throughout the entire building, from the second you walk in, there are delineations across the floor marking out 2 meters, so that at no point can you get within that. Also, arrows, so to dictate what the one-way system now is around the building, to make sure that at no point are 2 people going to cross in opposite directions. And so instead of having our dressing rooms, because usually, you're allocated a room, that's your room, you're sharing with whoever or not, and that's where you live. Whereas what they've done now is they're basically having us, well, with the reduced number of casts, this obviously helps, so they're spacing us out as much as they can. It's only ever going to be 1 person per room, and depending on who's in and when, you may well end up going from so for example, I was in David Nielsen's room for this week. Next week I'm back in my old room, and each night they're deep cleaned, they're disinfected, all this sort of stuff, so that at no point are 2 people going to be put in the same room and be in close proximity with one another. And then there's the stuff on set itself, which is people are doing their own hair and makeup, which doesn't affect me a huge amount because I've got far less hair than I usually have, which has actually ended up proving really helpful.
Do you still have to have, I don't know, like the screen makeup or whatever? I don't know about these things.
I for whatever reason, I don't have a huge amount, and I don't know if that's unique to me or if that's just generally the way things are, because I'm not entirely sure. I think it varies person to person.
Yeah.
So luckily, all I really need to be on top of is making sure that the hair looks as close to what it used to as possible. So just basically kind of just dig a parting out and put on what they call anti-shine, which is just to kind of combat the kind of glare off my shiny face
from the lights.
From the lights and stuff. So it's actually super simple. I mean, I'm sure I've still managed to cock it up somehow, but the actual process isn't all that hard.
Yeah. How's everyone else been finding that? Have you been speaking to any other cast members who've had a lot to do to get ready and are struggling, or are they doing all right?
I actually haven't heard anything so far. There haven't been any complaints so far, because I think if you tend to wear a lot of you tend to wear any makeup at all in your daily life, then I imagine the process of putting it on at work isn't that much different to the way you might do it at home. So I actually haven't heard too many complaints.
I can't think of anyone whose makeup on Corrie is vastly different to how they would look in the real world.
Yeah, I think if you're getting to when you start getting into the position where people are, if they have like stage or whatever, like wigs or stuff that's quite very specific in that way, then that probably would be quite difficult. And
I imagine if there's somebody with like a cut, if they've had an accident or they're in a fight in a scene or something.
Yeah, the special effects. Well, Ian Bartholomew, Jeff, he has a giant bottle.
Of course,
across his throat, and so that'll be interesting as to how they manage to work their way around that, because it may well be a case where you can allude to something, or you can cover it up with have the bandage over it, or if he's wearing just high-necked tops for a little while, possibly
lots of scarves in July.
A lot of so that would be interesting to see how they deal with that. But that, mercifully for me at least, that doesn't actually. It's not a worry of mine. So that's something that Barty's going to have to sort out with the makeup team.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, they do have pretty rigid safety measures in place in that department, because when people do have to go in to get makeup done, so that people are going to be at a distance. They're going to be gloved. I think for the most part, it's going to be the attempt, at least, is going to be trying to talk people through stuff.
Yeah.
But then they have full face coverings as well, like those giant kind of plastic visors. Yeah. The kind of things that's like a sneeze guard. Yeah. Just over your face. Oh, have you gone?
I know, I'm still there.
I lost you.
I'm still there.
Oh no, I've lost you.
Oh no.
Did I lose you there?
I don't know. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Can you see me?
Did you lose me?
No.
Oh, okay.
We'll carry on. I don't know whether I'm going to be able to edit this. We might include that bit in it anyway, just for the laugh.
Yeah, no, it's good to know that the amount of work that goes into these things. They show them when actually things do go wrong, and so they'll have those big old sneeze guards in front of their face. So I think from what I understand, based on certainly from the government at least, I think Corrie have actually gone way not overboard. They've gone way beyond what the recommended safety measures right. are.
Did you feel safe?
Yeah, at no point did I feel unsafe at all. Yeah. Like I went to go do the big shop the other day, and that was absolute chaos.
Oh, I know. Tell me about it.
It said that the situation at Corrie is it's been really well regimented, and unlike elsewhere, actually in daily life, the rules have been made very clear.
Yeah.
This is what's expected of you. This is what these are the measures that we are implementing, and it becomes very easy to follow when things aren't ambiguous like that.
Tell me what to do and I'll do it.
Well, basically, yeah.
As long as everyone follows the rules, everyone's responsible in some way, aren't they?
And that's part of the reason you have people like Security Dave on set, to kind of act as that kind of arbiter of safety. You're just making sure that people, are maintaining that stuff, because the temptation obviously is there, because for the most part you're working with really good friends as well as colleagues, and you do want to hear about what's been going on for the last few months.
Yeah. So who was the first friendly face that you saw, sort of cast wise, I suppose, that we're gonna know?
I was first on set with Ben Price and Jane Danson, both of whom are a delight. Like particularly Jane, because she, ever since I first started, really, she's just been this just, you see her name on a call sheet, and it is, it puts you so at ease because she's so lovely. So that was really nice.
Because you're filming, well, this past week you've been filming pickups or bits that you started filming before lockdown, didn't you? Just kind of finishing that off first.
Yeah, this is stuff so we are, as people and as a cast and as a crew and all that stuff, we are acting under lockdown rules, but we're not really addressing it directly because this is stuff that has to tie in with the episodes and scenes that we started shooting months ago. So it wouldn't really have worked. I don't think. There's no place to have put. Oh, by the way, this pandemic. Oh, what a nightmare! Like it wouldn't have had anywhere really to go. But I think from next week onwards, there are at the very least going to be kind of allusions to it. People commenting on the way that their behaviours had to change, and the way that I think, at least, I don't know if I've got any of these myself, but I'm pretty sure that the way the businesses are going to be run, that's going to be very different.
So are the scenes carrying directly on from what you've been filmed, or is it 2 months later? No. Like because the show, because it never went dark. Yeah. So say there's X amount left to go. There's half a dozen, maybe a bit more, something like that. I can't remember this isn't something I heard from them. This is something I read in the paper, so I might be nonsense. So it's just going to jump in onto the stuff that should have aired in mid-May or something, but is in fact going to air sometime in July. There isn't going to be a time skip or anything. Is that what you mean? That's what from after you've finished off what you were filming back in February, March time to what you're going to be filming, the new stuff.
It certainly doesn't look like that from the stuff that I've read, although that is the kind of thing that, if they put just a title card at some point, it's 10 weeks later. I don't think that that's going to happen. But that could be cool though. That could have been cool just to have a time jump, do a full on end game with it.
Oh yeah, it could have given opportunity to have things happen during the downtime that are gradually revealed over the course of the year or something. I guess we'll have to wait and see, because that's going to be end of July, 24th of July. I think I read that the first post-lockdown episodes are going to be on.
Yeah, the turnaround's going to be crazy, isn't it? That's got to be up there as that's as close to alive as you're going to get without doing one, isn't it?
Basically.
It's pretty intense for the editors, God bless them.
Yeah. So tell me about some of the ways that you've been able to keep social distance whilst you're filming, because you're kind of doing bits to make it look like you're next to each other when you're not, aren't you?
Yes. So I don't know if, I'm sure you have, but I don't know if the people who are listening or watching have seen the appendices to the Lord of the Rings films, the box sets, and how they had a whole thing about the way that they could work with perspective, by manoeuvring the camera around to make it look like people were shorter or taller, basically. Yeah. And you can use the similar camera moves and similar kind of tricks to make it look like people are closer or further away. So that's one of them. So I could be, fairly far away across the room, but the way in which the camera moves or the way in which a zoom is going to combine with the move, I'm not entirely sure how it works. It can make me look like I'm,
next to them.
Right next to them. And then also just slight rewrites, slight reblocking of things. So there was a scene where I had the other day where it was supposed to be a kind of kind of walk and talk, like a West Wing style walk and talk. Yeah. And so instead of that, because you could feasibly, because it was outside, so you could do that in social distance, but it would just look really weird. So what we did instead is we were in the community garden sat on a pair of benches and got Screwy Dave's big stick and just made sure that we were as far apart as we could be.
Yeah.
And then there's other ways of doing it, like you just trying to sort of rework a scene where if you're doing something that feels like it calls for kind of some intimacy, just to kind of discuss it with the other members of cast on set and just have a discussion about it, a way in which to maneuver around that to give that kind of sense of wanting to do that, but not perhaps being able to for whatever reason, because we can't really address because of pandemic, because obviously these people would be living together anyway. So,
right. You have had some scenes with Georgia since you've been back as well this week, haven't you? Speaking of intimacy.
Yes, I have. Yes, very briefly, all too briefly, unfortunately. But yes. So yeah, she and I had a scene. It was yesterday. In fact. It's always just so lovely to be on set with her, obviously, because she's just so brilliant. Yeah.
So you'll be having your veggie lasagna at opposite ends of one of those long dining tables now, I imagine.
Yeah, like Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah. You candelabra in the middle.
Yeah.
So without going into any specifics, has the lockdown meant any big changes in any of the stories that are upcoming for Imran? As far as you know.
Not as far as I know, because generally speaking, I'm not really made aware of stuff that's too far in advance anyway.
Yeah.
I think if I was to, start beating some doors down, they probably could give me a bit more of an insight, but stuff is so liable to change and things like that. So I try and because the volume of stuff that we get can be so high, I tend to try and focus more on the kind of what's immediately in front of me.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't actually know if anything has directly been affected on my end. I'd be surprised if it hadn't, just in terms of what they are just capable of doing. In terms
you've got so fewer episodes than you would have had, because you're still keeping with 3 for a long time. So I imagine everything's going to have to be quickened, or some bits dropped, or.
Yeah, I think because the framework that's been spoken about on this show before, about the way that you have an A storyline, a B storyline, a C storyline, you'll kind of flip between the 3 of them, and they'll get varying amounts of focus, or you'll cut between one and the other. I think it'll be a case where that gets simplified.
Yeah.
Reduce the number of cast that's required, just generally. I'm assuming, because people, there's a fairly large contingent of people who'd be considered, in a fairly vulnerable category anyway. So I think the whole kind of structure of the thing is going to be simplified a lot. I think it's going to be streamlined, just as a way of, because one, it means that there are fewer people there, so that reduces risk, and also what it means is that it's just easier to shoot. It's easier to keep getting through it, because a way that the show kind of transitions from scene to scenes a lot is you'll have a couple, just as an example, you'll have a couple of people walking along the street, so-and-so will pass by them, the camera will then go with them, and that'll lead you into storyline B.
Yeah.
And so just get rid of that storyline B completely, and then you can just have that one sort of through line, keeping it more simple and more separate as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, it sounds to me like Corrie know what they're doing. You're all safe, and I think
they've done a huge amount of work here. They really have.
Yeah, honestly, it seems like it's very well organised, and it could never be a perfect situation for knowing it, but it seems like they've definitely done as well as they possibly could, given the circumstances, which is what we're all doing, isn't it, in all walks of life?
Well, we are, and I have to take my hat off to them, because it's such a huge beast of a thing, of a show, and there's so many people who are involved, and there's so many moving parts, and so to have changed, well, not changed course, but to have maneuvered things around such, choppy waters, to kind of keep on with this shit metaphor, and do so whilst keeping everyone as safe as possible, and really going beyond in that respect. Actually, it is really admirable, and it does make us feel safe and valued as well. Like it's really good. Yeah.
Well, yeah, Coronation Street is the nation's treasure, isn't it? So you are part of that. So I'm glad to hear you feeling valued. We don't want to lose you off screen.
No, well, yeah.
Especially with the 60th coming up.
I know. I've been curious about that.
I know.
Like, because they're gonna have to get, because some of the people who are at risk, actually, almost without, I think without exception, are just the most beloved people on the show, and so they're gonna have to find a way to
get Ken
do
in.
that. Like, well, yeah, like, are they gonna get Ken to do a Zoom call? I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe.
I don't know how. I mean, they've managed to maneuver around all of this so far. So I'm sure, making sure that all of those titans of the show, the Mount Rushmore of the show, I'm sure that getting them involved and making sure that they're a part of, because that's a pretty landmark episode, isn't it? Like, that's a big deal.
Certainly, yeah.
So, and also, because correct me if I'm wrong, because I didn't actually watch the press conference that they did, but they did say that it wasn't going to be live, didn't they?
I think I don't know whether they said it in the press conference, because I've only seen snippets of that in the news as well, but I think Ian McLeod said 3 or 4 months ago that he didn't intend to do a live one. So
well, in that case, there are definitely ways to do it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Like, to make sure that it's a closed set and all that kind of thing. Yeah,
we trust them. They're doing all right so far.
Yeah, they've got 60 years of experience to work with. So
Exactly.
They
can work through this. Well, Charlie, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast today to talk about this. It's been great hearing firsthand how it's been going and how safe it's been and everything. And you're still smiling after your first week back.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, all is good.
Cool. And you're back next week? Back in the studio?
I am back next week, yeah. I'm starting on some of the new stuff, I think.
Exciting.
So that's exciting.
Stuff. Yeah, I'll text you about that next week then.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do that away from Mike.
Thank you very much. Well, I'll leave you to it. Enjoy the rest of your evening then. See you, Charlie.
Thank you.
Bye.
Lots of love.
See ya.
Bye.